jump on, they jump on. But everybody who's on the call, let me introduce Tom Bunkle, who is talking to us from Edinburgh, Scotland, or north of there. Tom, are you at your? I guess you're at your home somewhere.
Edinburgh, no, in Edinburgh.
It is Edinburgh,
Yeah,
and
so
it is 10:15 in the evening your time.
that's correct. Yep, past my bedtime.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll make sure we keep the questions short.
No.
And Mr. Hurley just joined us. Mr. Ogle's here. Good. We're going to go. We're going to start. Tom Bunkle is an internationally renowned tourism consultant and is going to talk to us about destination branding, and he's going to talk to us about about some post-COVID challenges. So please, Tom, and I think, Tom, you want to take questions during the presentation.
Yeah, that's fine.
And you got control of that.
Okay, yeah.
So please, Tom, take it away and welcome.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me just get the screen up here. Oops.
You okay?
Yeah, it's not coming up.
It's coming.
I see you fine, Tom.
No, I'm trying to get the PowerPoint up.
Oh,
It nearly did.
There we are. Can you see that?
there it
Yes.
is. You got it.
Okay.
Yep.
Right, well, hi everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you. I'm honored. It's a long time since I've been in Memphis, but many years ago, I did have a good evening listening to some great blues on Beale Street, but that was quite a while ago. So what I'm going to do is, I'll tell you first a little bit about myself and get over that bit quickly and then get on to the meat. But what we do at Yellow Railroad is destination branding, tourism marketing, destination management planning, which is becoming much more important nowadays, and crisis recovery for destinations after terrorism, natural disasters, and of course, at the moment, pandemics. We work all over the world. These are just some of the places that, I'm just going to try and, move this out of the way. That's it. Some of the places that we've worked in, but many more around Africa, Asia, Middle East, Europe, North America, and the Caribbean. So I set up Yellow Railroad as an international consultancy for destinations 20 years ago.
Really?
Go ahead. Okay, I'm also a writer and lecturer. I'm an honorary professor at a university in Edinburgh, and I write and lecture on destination branding and travel trends and crisis recovery. Before consultancy, I was chief executive of Visit Scotland, which is the Scottish National Tourism Board. And before that, I worked for Visit Britain in California, Norway, and Southeast Asia, alongside one of our illustrious attendees tonight, Ron Roy.
Yeah.
Who's got a slate cold.
So this is what I'm going to talk about. First of all, as Chris has said, I'm going to talk about surfing the tsunami that is COVID, and look at very briefly the impact on travel, the implications for businesses and places, and then some of the imperatives for action. Now, this is very much crystal ball stuff. Nobody knows, but we'll have a guess. Then Chris has asked me to talk a little bit about branding and the experience of branding Scotland and the different images of Scotland in different markets. And then we'll come back to looking at the possible timeline for recovery for tourism from COVID. So as Chris has said, I'm very happy to take questions and have discussion as we go, because I think that will be better, because you don't want to save up all your questions till the end. So please let's try interrupting rather than putting the electronic hand up when you want to say something. That will require a bit of discipline, but I think we can do that. If it gets too messy, then we can rethink it. So please just give way to other people who are speaking, but let's try it. So just jump in whenever you have anything to say, ask, or comment on. So this is the starting point in terms of the tsunami. back in June, we were all shocked to find that pretty much the whole world was closed until further notice. So before we go into all this, I just want to set out some assumptions. First of all, as I say, this is an uncertain world. We can guess and speculate all we want, but nobody knows what the future is going to look like. We've got some indicators, but we really don't know. The beauty of that is you can't hold me to account. The past also, I think, more than ever before, the past offers us no roadmap for the future because things are going to change, I think, in some ways, quite radically. And we'll look at those in a minute. Some will stay the same, but we can't use the past as a guide as we have in past crises. Also, I'm really allergic to this phrase, the new normal. I think it's a sloppy, lazy phrase. People talk about it because to me, normal is just a setting on your washing machine. There is no such thing as normal. None of us are normal, never have been, never will be. And the reason I'm allergic to it, and I want to dissuade people from using it, is because it suggests that there was a static normal in the past, which there wasn't, point A, and we will move to a new static normal in the future, point B. Well, we won't. The world is always in flux, and never more so than now. So I think we've got to accept that and accept this continual fluidity and movement, and there isn't going to be a static situation in the future, particularly with technology. Also, another assumption, the homogeneous traveler is an illusion. We're all different. We always have been. And when you read media reports that says, the traveler will do this, the traveler will do that, or we will go back to this type of travel, my question is always, who? You, me, her, him, we're all so different. We will do things differently, which we will look at again in a minute. Also, when tourism reboots after this crisis, I think we will see different business models kicking in. I read something today where at the Association of British Travel Agents Convention today, they were saying the mindset we should have is the mindset of a startup, because things are going to be so different. We really need to adopt all the principles and freedom of thinking and different ways of thinking that you do when you start up, which is kind of an interesting perspective. But there will be different business models.
Just for today, just for an hour. I got to play with the computer.
But our desires will persist. We'll still want to go away, to relax, to see things, to see architecture, culture, to go to hot countries, to go skiing, whatever it is. We'll still want to do a lot of these things, but the way they're satisfying them, I think, will in many cases be different. The devil will be in the detail because we all have different motivations for travel, different desires, and different concerns, as you will see shortly. And this is something that's very different from after every other crisis, pretty much in our lives. Tourism has been one of the first sectors to bounce back after terrorism attacks, after natural disasters, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, after economic shocks. Tourism has been very, very resilient. But for an industry that requires people to move from their home to another country to create value, you can understand why I'm saying I think it'll be last in the queue, last in line to come back, just because of the health, hygiene, and fear issues around movement. So the resilience of tourism will be tested like never before. I'm sure it will come back, but it'll take a lot longer than ever. So when people compare the pandemic to 9/11 or to the tsunami in Sri Lanka or to various other terrorist attacks or the Icelandic volcano, no, it's not like that at all. It is global, it's embedded in people's psyches, and I think it will be quite a while, and so do most commentators, before it does come back fully. Another assumption, I think, is we mustn't think that reopening is the same as recovery. A lot of businesses have reopened, but for all sorts of reasons, you'll see they're not doing so well. So recovery is not the same as reopening. Those are the assumptions I think we just need to bear in mind as we move forward. Happy for anyone to throw any rotten tomatoes at me just now and say that's all wrong. But if not, I don't feel any rotten tomatoes, I'll move on. Now, let's just look at the critical issues that underlie the potential for recovery. Firstly, there's the medical epidemiological situation. And in my view, we're going to have the preventative measures dominating the rest of this year, pretty much globally, not everywhere, but pretty much. Social distancing, requirement to wear masks, hygiene measures, temperature checks, all those things that are making airports, airlines, and people happy or a little less uncomfortable in traveling. I don't know if you're familiar with this term, test, trace, and isolate, but it's certainly something we're talking a lot about here, about testing so that you can isolate the vulnerable. And ideally, if you do that, you can allow the people who are not infected or symptomatic to carry on normally and therefore keep the economy going. This is a delicate balance, but I think, and we haven't done it very well here. I think Germany and some other countries have done it quite well, but I think that is the first big step that will give a lot more people the confidence to travel once they know who's being isolated and why and how to do it, and then allowing the rest to travel and allowing the economy to kick off again. So that, I think, is going to dominate a lot of our efforts until the end of this year at least. And then, of course, we have the holy grail of vaccination. Will we ever find one? That's a big question, because we've never found a vaccination for HIV/AIDS or the common cold, but hopefully we will. But if we do, we're unlikely to have it trialed, rolled out and inoculated, people inoculated at scale, manufactured and inoculated at scale, until I would say probably late 2021. And that's assuming we find it by early 2021. So I think we've got a while to wait for that. However, in the meantime, we are, and you've had experience of it in the US recently with the president, you've got new drugs coming on stream to treat COVID-related disorders therapeutically, so it reduces the impact and the danger of the disease. And I think that's the next big step that might inspire a lot more public confidence. So those are the three steps, I think, that we've got to be thinking about that need to be taken before we get widespread public confidence in traveling. The next issues around this are the political, governmental and regulatory issues. Lockdown has taken place in various forms in various countries around the world. We've got a phased release here in the UK. We're going back to lockdown in some areas where there are high incidences of infection again. I think we're going to see, as this happens, in and out of lockdown, more spikes, more lockdown. As we reduce infection, we get released again, and then we get more spikes. That I think is about learning to live with this disease for the sake of the economy. I think that's going to happen. There are issues around borders. Many countries have closed their borders until 2021. Australia is talking about possibly having to keep their borders closed till 2022. I don't believe they will, but it's interesting that some governments are even talking about that. And then quarantine. Different countries are quarantining other visitors when they come back from countries they perceive to be high-risk countries. And that will be forever changing as the infection rates rise and fall. Every few days, you'll see countries being put into or taken off quarantine. And of course, if we quarantine you, you quarantine us, because it's a reciprocal thing, often that's political rather than medical, but nevertheless, that I think is an issue that's going to continue. And then of course we have the government advisories where the State Department, or in our case, the Foreign Office, advises against travel to certain countries because of risk. And that means it's hard to get insurance to travel there. That means you're not going to travel there usually. So that's the governmental stuff. Commercially, with social distancing, it's really hard for a lot of businesses to actually get the throughput and the numbers to be viable. If you have to sit 2 meters away from each other in a restaurant, the restaurant is going to be possibly only half full at least. Now, if you're operating on a 65, 70% load factor for profitability, that you're stuffed. Flights the same. Coaches, there's a lot of places in Europe, 15-seater coaches are only allowed to take 7 people. So there are real commercial issues there about actually a lot of people saying, I'm not going to open, I'm not going to run the tour because it's just not viable. Then there are the issues. I'm sorry to be gloomy here, but I want to put down these issues and then try and get positive towards the end. Staff availability. A lot of us depend in the tourism industry for immigrant labor. A lot of these people are going home, or we just lose them because the business is closed down and they don't come back into the industry. We lose skills. A lot of the skills will be hard to recover. And in remoter areas, if you haven't got viable routes, it may be harder for tourists to get access to them. And then finally, under the critical issues, attitudinal. Travelers' attitude to risk is related to their willingness to travel, or sorry, their willingness to travel is related to their attitude to risk. So on the one hand, you have a lot of people with pent-up demand to travel, but also on the other side of that coin, you have quite a lot of caution and fear about traveling. And we'll look at who those people are a little later. And then you have community sensitivity. I don't know about in the States, but certainly here in the UK and parts of Europe, a lot of communities don't want visitors because they're saying, you know, we don't want you to come and bring your bugs here. We don't want to be infected. And we're seeing in some places these sort of signs going up, especially when you're getting a peak of infections. Please don't have a holiday here until this thing is over. Now, fortunately, it's only in a few places, but there is an issue around that. Interestingly, I'm going to show you, and I hope nobody's offended by this, but an ad that the Visit Berlin have actually started running this week, which is very different from any Come to Berlin ad that you've ever seen. And basically it's about saying, you know, if you come here, wear a mask. Otherwise, this is how we treat you. Now, this is a tourist board. I've never seen anything like that before, but it's a very brutal message saying, come here, you're welcome, but wear a mask or you're not. So really, we've never seen this sort of attitude from destinations before.
Tom, let me just, that message is official German Berlin government policy?
It's Visit Berlin, the tourist board for Berlin's own advertising, which broke, I think it was this week, yeah.
Wow.
You can Google it. And I mean, it's a pretty stark message, isn't it?
Yeah. Got me right between the eyes.
Yeah. But it's really interesting. A lot of things are being turned on their head at the moment because that would never, I mean, I used to run a tourist board. Ron knows this, that you would never do anything like that in a month of Sundays, a year of Sundays in the old days. But now people are saying, you know, a lot of ads are running saying, you'll be very welcome, please stay away, you'll be very welcome when things are over. And they're running ads to remind you how beautiful they are and that those places are still there. But this one's saying, and I guess it's different because it's a city, because a lot of people are packed together in cities. But yeah, it's brutal, isn't it?
Wow.
So what about the impact? Well, I'm going to run through some numbers here. Globally, we've seen the World Tourism Organization, so we've got anticipating about a 58 to 78% reduction in international tourist arrivals worldwide. Up to 1 billion fewer arrivals worldwide. About 1.2 trillion of lost expenditure, which is nearly 3% of global GDP. And between 98 and 198 million jobs lost. This is desperate. This is what I was saying about we're going to lose a lot of skills. We're going to lose a lot of people from the industry. Global airline traffic, according to IATA, declined in one of the busiest months of the year, July this year, by 92%. A lot of the passenger traffic that's flying the long routes at the moment is because the airlines can carry freight and they're actually able to accommodate passengers as well. IATA is predicting that airline losses worldwide will be about $84 billion. And that, excuse me, airline debt, which was 5 times cash flow in 2019, is going to be between 17 and 18 times cash flow in 2021. That's huge. Obviously, that means we're going to have to expect mergers and failures, and the big airlines are predicting a subdued demand for 4 years. But interestingly, the last 10 years of profitability have been driven by only about 20 to 30 airlines, which says that there must be an awful lot of airlines that are receiving government subsidies to run. So it's interesting. Will they stay in business? Will those governments still have the money to keep them in business, or what? So that's a pretty devastating picture, I think. You know, it is a picture of economic devastation. There is, I think, a risk of social disruption, by which I mean the way we do things, the way we travel, the way we work. A lot of these things will change. And I think in countries like many of the countries I've worked in various parts of the world, such as Africa, developing countries where they have become disproportionately dependent on tourism, if they become unable to feed themselves, I think there is a risk that we will see political unrest in a number of countries. So those are the gloomy predictions. I sincerely hope it's not as bad as that, but that's the bad stuff. So let's look at the.
Hi, Tom.
Yeah.
Tom, I'm sorry. I'm Radesh. I'm the dean of the Clements Wilson School. Thank you for doing this. I have a quick question about the slide that you just had. Are you seeing any trends in the global market in some countries where there's a drive towards nationalizing some of these tourism outlets, entities like the airlines or the hotel industries? Because if they depend so much on government funding for a long duration of time, are you seeing any of that happening?
That's a really interesting question, Radesh. The short answer is no, I'm not.
Okay.
It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. On the other hand, I think, and certainly in our own country in the UK, governments very often underestimate the economic impact of tourism, and therefore often don't step up to the plate. And we've got a lot of, as you have and many countries do, a lot of support for people who are losing their jobs, or to keep people in work until we get past this. But I am not seeing, well, that said, the British government is nationalising the railways effectively, but that's more because the way they licensed them privately before wasn't working. It's not a response to this, I don't think. But I'm not aware, no, of this happening. And I just don't think many governments would have the money to do that anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, let me go back on that. I think South African Airways, which was going bust, I think the South African government has stepped in to support them.
Yeah.
I need to check. I know there's something going on there. So I suspect with national airlines, which are about national pride and prestige, we might.
Tom, in the US, the three big American airlines have resisted the offer they got from the government to take equity in the airlines in return for support, because they're afraid of effectively being taken over by government.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, most of them are in a pretty fortunate position, I think, in being have good cash reserves. So
Delta was the strong one here. The other two are not quite so healthy. Yeah.
But I guess another big thing, I think, going for you in the US is you have such a massive internal market, and that's something we'll come on to in a minute, that we're going to see a lot more domestic travel. So I think that's all positive.
Okay. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So there we are. So this is a survey that was done by the European Travel Commission this month. Just a quick look at consumer sentiment about travel in Europe. The main concerns people have is that if they're away traveling, that their home government puts them in quarantine when they come back. So let's say you go to Greece and it's okay to go there, and in 3 days' time, the British government says you've got to quarantine for 2 weeks when you come back. That's the biggest fear a lot of people are concerned, a lot of people have. The second one is rising COVID cases, which is happening. The third is about falling ill during the trip, which is all to do with insurance, which is quite complex. And then the forever changing travel restrictions, which is understandable because the level of infections are going up and down in different countries. Secondly, people's main priorities are now about health and safety above anything else. 21%. You go down, the next at 14% is just peace of mind and relaxation. But interestingly, affordability is 13%. So it's the price of the holiday. I mean, obviously, you're not going to go in somewhere you can't afford, but you're twice as worried, almost twice as worried about health and safety now in Europe as you are about price. And in terms of what influences your booking, having flexible cancellation policies is the biggest issue, because you don't want to book a holiday for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months ahead, and suddenly find that there are new restrictions put on travel and you can't get your money back. So companies that are offering flexible cancellation policies will have a competitive advantage. The second issue is about social distancing on flights. I was interested to see, I think Southwest said they were socially distancing every flight and selling only 2 out of every 3 seats. The Ryanair in Europe, which really modeled its business model on Southwest, a no-frills airline, saying they can't survive doing that. So I'm really interested that Southwest is doing that and can. It may be to do with volume, but Ryanair's got pretty big volume too. And then
I didn't realize, I know JetBlue is doing that, but I didn't realize Southwest is doing it as well.
Yes, they are.
They are. Oh, good.
And Delta is too.
Oh, they've done it from the start.
Yes.
Yeah.
it's really interesting, because that's a big issue for a lot of people. And most airlines here are saying we couldn't survive doing that. So interesting. I'd be interested to see how, in the US they can. Maybe, as I say, it's to do with volume and airfares or whatever. Ryanair was said, well, Southwest are really cheap too. But anyway, and then having the travel restrictions lifted is the next big deal. So let's look at the implications of some of these things. For destinations and businesses, big question, how much of our tourism infrastructure will survive? It's inevitable a lot of places will go bust. Will they come back? Big issue around investor confidence. From what I've said, tourism will be last in the queue to recover. So will investors get frightened off? I'm pleased to say that I see around the world, and certainly here, still a lot of hotel development still going ahead. Well, not a lot, quite a bit of hotel development still going ahead, and 1 or 2 new investors coming in. I'm not sure why, but I wonder if they're thinking, well, a lot of this business is going to be domestic, so it's still going to be good. But there's a big question mark over how confident will investors be, and what sort of product will they look to invest in? Will it be domestic or international? Supply chain, if we lose bits of the supply chain, because we forget about that very often in the tourism industry, the hauliers, the trucking companies, the laundries that wash the hotel sheets, the web developers, the people, food producers, all these people are critical. And if you take just 1 or 2 of them out of the supply chain, you have the potential for collapse. And a classic example I'm thinking of is, I've done a lot of work in Africa. So if you don't have people traveling there, people who repair safari tents, it's a small example, but they risk going out of business. If they go out of business, those skills are likely to have gone for some time, and that might be hard to replace. So that's just an example of some of the small things that could have a big impact on the tourism supply chain. Hygiene measures, there's a big cost in terms of payroll, materials, and time. This is an estimate for a 250-bed hotel running at about 60% occupancy. They reckon it costs an extra $65,000 a year just to implement these hygiene measures. So that's a lot on top of your operating costs. Excuse me. And then you've got the cost of social distancing, which reduces your throughput and your numbers. There are a lot of unknowns still about insurance costs and liability, and can you insure against all sorts of unforeseen circumstances. If somebody gets COVID and says they got it in your restaurant, are you covered? Probably not, all these things. So who will be the winners and losers out of this situation? Well, I don't know if you're familiar with this term as staycations, but
Yes, we are.
You are, okay, stay at home on your vacation. I mean, no brainer. You're seeing it all over the world. That's going to be the big winner versus international travel, because you don't have to get on a plane, you don't have to, you're more familiar with your home turf. Whether I think we'll see a lot of people who rediscover a lot of their own country after this, and may continue to stay and visit in their own country, which in some ways will be good. However, only some countries have the opportunity for that, because a lot of developing countries, as I said, so dependent on international tourism, they haven't got the opportunity for that kind of domestic tourism. We're lucky, you're lucky, we all do in Europe and North America. we're going to see rural areas and the natural environment be favored over cities just because of the whole issue of social distancing and crowding. People are going to be, it's not an either or, it's just saying that the items in blue are going to benefit more and the items in red are probably going to have a lower prevalence of visitors than before. So rural areas, because people think that that's where there's space, they can get away from the crowding of cities. We're seeing rural areas becoming very popular. Similarly, the outdoors versus indoors, that goes for attractions. It'll be interesting to watch some of the big outdoor attractions like Disneyland, who have got a very, very thorough COVID management policy in place, whether they, how well they continue to do. But generally, I think you'll see more outdoor attractions doing well than indoors. Self-catering, which is renting a house so you can be self-isolated, you don't have to mix with other people like you do in a hotel, and camper vans rather than serviced accommodation like hotels. As I say, I'm not saying hotels will have nothing, it's just that they will not have the business they used to, whereas we're seeing in a lot of countries the self-catering booming. Road trips, for the same reason, you can go in your own car, you're not on public transport, you're not in a coach, you're not on a train, you're not in an airplane. Road trips by car, sadly for the environment in many ways, but they're going to become more popular. Video streaming, we're talking about Netflix and Indigo versus theaters and cinemas, that's booming. Online meetings like this have boomed, and they've taught us that a lot of those completely unnecessary business meetings that we all used to go to, we don't have to go to anymore. So in some ways that's a good thing, but it's not so good for the hotels, the airlines, and the taxi companies that used to benefit from this. So I think we'll see a big rejigging. This is one of the biggest things I think we'll see change. Blended working versus office-based, by which I mean allowing more people to work from home for a couple of days a week maybe, or several days a week, coming into the office for some of the time. But it means it's a win-win, because offices can cut their costs by reducing the amount of office space they buy or rent. They can have a smaller space for people to meet, and it works possibly for everyone. I know if you're stuck in a one-bedroom basement apartment in Manhattan in the depths of summer, the height of summer, it's probably not so attractive. But I think it's the way that it's going to go. My younger son works in Seattle, and he's telling me that some of the big household name companies there, and particularly the tech companies, are actually getting rid of some of their buildings. So there's and the tech guys are often ahead of the game here. So I think we're going to see a lot of office space freed up, a lot of blended working worldwide, where people partly from home, partly from the office. I mean, it'll be a sad day because if it goes the whole way, and I don't think it will, because we need that human contact. And I put this in.
I have a question about that, if I may. This is Bill Mullins. I'm an instructor at Kimmons Wilson Culinary Institute.
Yeah.
How about the landlords and the people that own the bigger buildings? How is it going to affect them in that particular process? Has there been any looking into that?
I think it's so new, and it's another big question, Bill. I think it's such a new phenomenon. I don't know, although what I would say, what a lot of hotels have been doing, I know in the US and here, have been actually renting out bedrooms as office space. Because if you've got a room and you've got 2 kids at home and a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, then you want to go and you want to get away to do your work. So that's happening. I would think that we might, and I think this is a trend that's been happening for some time, we might see later more people, goes counter to what I'm about to say as well, but more people moving back into the city, more offices becoming residential. On the other hand, you're also seeing people move out of the city because of better value for families. So I don't know, but we've seen with out-of-town shopping malls and online shopping, we have seen the hollowing out of city centers. And there is a trend, I think it started in France, called the 15-minute city. I don't know if you're familiar with that, whereby our city planners are now looking at how do you make everything, all the services that people need, so doctors, supermarkets, everything within 15 minutes of where they live. And they're trying to recreate communities within the city which means that people don't have to travel a lot. But I don't know. The answer is I don't know. And I think that there must be some bigger brains than mine looking at that at the moment, because I think a lot of big companies are going to be left with a lot of real estate that they can't use, and there's a big burden around their neck. Anybody else got any thoughts on that?
I have one very quick one. We've noticed a recent trend where short-term rentals are rebounding a lot faster than hotels. So I don't know if that's a global thing, but it's in the US. There's a report out there that they didn't actually go down as much as hotels did. Short-term rental, their occupancies were always, moderate, but the hotels were at 70% or 65 to 70, and they came down to 20%.
Yeah.
But the rebound is not. I mean, people are still doing short-term rental.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to this desire this concern for safety and social distancing. But I'm just moving on to the next thing. I just put this because I love this term. I came across this somewhere, hyper-local deep travel. What does it mean? It's basically slow travel. People spending more time in one place rather than rushing around and doing an Instagram destination snacking, taking a picture and you don't know where you were until you look at it after you get home on your Instagram feed. So I think we're seeing a bit of a trend of people wanting to spend more time in one place. And obviously culture is being more consumed online than in festivals and events. And I'm not saying this may happen, but I don't know if you remember, but after 9/11, we saw a big uptick in multi-generational travel, grandparents, parents, and grandchildren traveling together. There was a sentiment that so people realized what mattered to them and wanted to spend time with their loved ones. And that sometimes it was friends, but sometimes it was multi-generational. So I think we might see an increase. It's not going to take over from the big market of couples, but it's probably going to pick up rather than group travel and cruise where you are thrust together with a lot of people for a fair period of time. But I'm saying business travel, corporate travel is probably going to drop because of the facility of online meetings, which both cuts costs and means you don't have to travel. In fact, I think it was Cisco Systems in about a year or more ago, before the pandemic, decided they had what did they call it? It was basically asked every employee to look in the mirror and say, do you really need to travel? And they took something like $100,000 out of their travel budget just by asking people to think digital and not travel unless it was absolutely essential. So that was before this. So there's a win-win there as well. But what about conferences? I think there's a slightly different situation here because of the need for human contact, I think we will see a resurgence in conferences because people want to get together. And when you do any research into conferences and why people went to a conference, when they're honest, they say it was about networking or having a beer in the bar with their friends and meeting new people. And usually the actual subject matter of the conference is secondary. So I think we will see a resurgence just because of this need for social interaction. Not 100% the way it was, but I think it'll come back much more than corporate travel will. Prices, I think, for all the reasons we've said, I think they're going to go up on everything because they're going to have to make travel viable, to make accommodation viable, to make all these things viable. And what about people's disposable income? I think there are two sides to this. One, it's quite clear that in many countries, we're going to have quite a deep and long recession, I think, where the economy isn't going to bound back in a V shape like a lot of people are predicting. I may be wrong, but I think that, and I think we're going to see quite a lot of unemployment for some time. So
you're right.
Sorry?
You're absolutely right, Tom.
So we'll have a lot of people who don't have the disposable income they did before to travel. On the other hand, those who are still in work have probably saved money on, particularly in cities like London and New York or wherever, where they're not spending money on childcare. They're not spending money on commuting. So there's an element there that there will be some people with disposable income. But I think, yeah, Ron, I think it's the majority. It's going to be harder rather than easier.
And also on your point, I think that one area that's going to be really the last to come back is incentive travel.
Yeah.
Because the people who normally organize these, you know, the corporations that reward the people with travel, they're always concerned about safety, even in good times. And now they're going to be very unwilling to send people off to get infected somewhere, you know. That's going to be and meetings, I think the small meetings will come back faster than big conferences. And I think business travel will come back because people do miss the face-to-face interaction. That will come back, but slowly.
Yes, yeah. But there's another issue actually, and so I haven't, that you raised, Ron. The whole issue, probably I don't know if it's the same in the States, but you remember Greta Thunberg and the issue of flight shaming. And different people in different countries are taking it more or less seriously. But there is an issue when a company offers an incentive that means travel. I think a lot more people are going to look harder at how they justify that, which I think will be another, I won't say it's not a nail in the coffin of incentive travel, but it's just another disincentive to incentive.
So the winners will just have to settle for getting a new car rather than a trip to Rome.
Yeah. Maybe just a burger. Could be that bad. So anyway, let's just summarize. Travel in the new world, what will it look like? Well, I think the key points are reassurance about safety, health and hygiene and health is going to be critical. Now, you've seen lots of countries, started with one of the world leaders in everything to do with travel, Singapore, coming up with Singapore Clean Initiative, which they actually stuck a plaque on the front of their 4-star hotels, or the hotels that got it, and said to customers, we're COVID secure. Now, a year ago, I'd have said to him, don't mention the problem. In any crisis, everything I've done about crisis recovery and teaching people is don't mention the problem. Talk about the good stuff in the future. But we're now having to do it because visitors, customers are wanting to know. So many countries have this safety, hygiene, health, and the World Travel and Tourism Council has also introduced one. But it's going to have to be subtle. You can't stick an ad up on television and say we're safe, but you can do it through PR and social media. But I think for the first time in years, reassurance is going to have to be part of the marketing message.
Absolutely.
And then advanced booking. You know, we're not going to get in because the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, the Sistine Chapel in Rome, the Tower of London, the Empire State Building, whatever, they can't take as many people as before. So you're going to have to advance booking. The good thing for customers is that gives you the certainty of getting in, a better experience because it's less crowded, and the confidence that you can get in. So that, I think, is going to be advanced booking on many more aspects of the travel world is going to be important. And there needs to be flexibility on cancellations there too. And low touch is going to be a real issue. Tech is going to accelerate enormously. We have been contactless for some time, and cashless, but digital is going to be the default. I actually went and got my hair cut after a long lockdown here for, I think, 3 or 4 months. And my barber's cash machine didn't work. So I had to pay with money, real money. I mean, I know you've been doing this in the States for years. And I opened my wallet, and I hadn't opened my wallet in something like 6 months. And I know, Ron, you'll say that's because I'm a Scotsman. But
yes. Did the moths fly out?
Yeah. It felt very strange to take cash out. So I think we're going to see all sorts of low touch purchasing and interactions kind of.
That's happening. It's happening here as well.
Yeah, I think I'm talking globally. I think this is sort of, and then phasing the targeting of our marketing message has always been a big issue. The right message, the right people at the right time in the right media. But let's look at these people: the Fogos, the Yolos, and the Blistos. So the Fogos. So we're going to have to segment these people by the.
So now I'm a Fogo.
You are. Well, I'm not sure. You're possibly a Blisto too, Ron. Well, I'll tell you what I mean, we're going to have to segment our markets, not just demographically and by values and psychographically. We're going to have to segment them by their reluctance or willingness to travel. So the Fogos are the fear of going out. The people who are more vulnerable, often older, young families, they don't want to go right now. They want to play safe. The YOLOs, on the other hand, they're up for it. They're the you only live oncers. And they're the millennials and Gen Zs, the people who are less likely to catch anything serious or to have a bad time if they do. So they're going to jump on a plane tomorrow. They don't care where it's going. They just want to get out. And there's a lot of them, and they've got a lot of money. And the blisters, Ron, the blisters are the bucket list ticker offers. The people who are, forgive me for these acronyms, but the people who realize, time's maybe not so much on the side. They've got a lot they still want to do. So they're sort of YOLOs, but they're a bit older. They're still going to do stuff because they want to. So companies and businesses and tourist boards are going to have to think about these things when they start looking at who they target in the short term. And people are going to look for value for time. I read this phrase the other day, intentional travel. Well, I don't know about you, but I've never gone anywhere unintentionally in my life. This is a phrase people are using to mean, I really want to go there. As I said earlier, it's about slow travel, experiencing the place, traveling less often and staying longer in one place.
Well, Tom, Singapore Airlines has flights to nowhere.
I know, yeah.
Yes,
And
I
that's
saw
part
that.
of this.
I saw that, Dean. I saw that, Dean, and I read in the journal today that Singapore Airlines is actually now selling seats on the planes on the ground to eat lunch.
Right.
They actually, you can go to Changi Airport and for $45, you can have lunch in a Singapore Airlines plane on the ground. Or for 100 and something, you can go business class, and for, I don't know, 900, you can sit in one of their first class seats and eat lunch.
That's
They're
right.
not going anywhere.
No, I know. As I've said to many airline executives in the past who promote their food as a marketing advantage, do you know anybody who would ever pay to have airline food?
Well, yeah,
Would you go out for anybody? Here we are. Singapore's done it again.
yeah, but with classic chefs in charge. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not just it's not just the sous vide stuff out of the standard catering company. It's supervised by a top chef.
Indeed, yes, yeah. And that'll be great. I'm interested, yeah. But anyway, carrying on, that the experience has to be worth the higher price. And as I say, safety and hygiene is a lot of research we're seeing is it's coming out at the top, far more important than price. So that has to be part of the marketing message. More than ever, I think communications has to be authentic, relevant, and honest, because we are seeing some governments saying, it's not a problem, we're safe here. And, again, it's the first rule of crisis recovery. Never, ever say you're safe, because nobody ever is, you can't tell. And certainly never let your tourism minister say it. And I remember some years ago, I don't know if you remember the terrible shootings on the beach in Sousse in Tunisia, where 38
I do, yes.
were killed. And they put a lot of new safety precautions in, and they had armed guards patrolling the beach. And the tourism minister stood up in front of the world's press and said, there is no risk here now, you're perfectly safe. And I thought, no, because what you do is attract your attention to it. But so what I'm saying is, people are believing what governments and tourist boards say less and less. So communications have to be authentic and honest. And there is an increasing demand, particularly amongst younger people, as demonstration that the destination is sustainable, that it looks after itself, that it's the community benefit rather than the water in your swimming pool being taken from drinking water for local people, whatever. And I think we're going to need to see a lot more good destination management than ever before. And trust. It's going to be much, much more about trust than ever before, which is a neat segue, if I have time, for me to go into the whole issue of branding, because that underlies trust. How are we doing for time, Chris?
12 minutes, Tom, to go.
Oh, geez. Okay, I'll run through this. So,
Tom, can I just make a quick comment? I'm sorry. This is important. This is the recovery rates across the globe for different countries economically is different. So there, like a lot of countries in Asia are recovering quickly. So do you think the outbound tourists would be more from those countries because they're allowed to travel, and also they have higher propensity to go overseas for business and pleasure? Do you see that happening as a trend?
I think there'll be a great variety in where they travel to, and where they travel to. The research is telling us at the moment that where they travel to will be dictated by the whole issue of what's happening at home, but also how good the pandemic situation is in the countries they might think of going to. And particularly, I've seen research that says the quality of healthcare in those countries is going to be important. And can they trust those countries in what they're saying about, are they testing, or are they just saying, no, we don't have a high level of infection? So there's all sorts of subtleties like that. I think Asian travel will be, I mean, it's always much more intra-Asia than it is extra-Asia. I think we're going to see them staying within Asia a lot more. But again, who knows?
Thank you. Yeah.
And another big reason for that is that for a lot of Asian leisure travelers, cities are really important, and people are veering away from cities at the moment because of crowding. So I think it'll take them a while to come back. I think there'll be much more internal travel. So quickly, I'm going to run through branding very quickly. So what is a brand? Let me just, I mean, it's about, you know, sometimes we can be grumpy, sometimes we can be happy, but we have a core personality. And that's what it is about a destination. It's the personality that makes that destination distinctive and memorable, and allows it to distinguish itself from its competitors, build loyalty amongst its customers, and hopefully be able to charge a premium price and not get into a spiral of discounting. So I'm going to very quickly go through this. So in my view, we hear a lot of people saying a brand is some of these things, which it's not, apart from this. This is what I would say a brand is. It's your competitive identity. It's not a product or a logo, and it makes us different and makes us stand out. I'm doing this in the lead up to taking you through the Scottish brand. So very quickly, how do we form impressions of other places, brands that we export, the way we promote tourism and inward investment, domestic and foreign policy, iconic public figures on the world stage, how our citizens behave when abroad, and how they treat strangers at home. And I always say to students, for somebody, you may be, let's take a student from Kazakhstan in London, then a lot of people have never met anyone from Kazakhstan before. Their impression of Kazakhstan will be formed by that student. So we're all ambassadors when we're out of our own country for our own brand. We form impressions through our awareness of the built and natural environment, the way the world covers us, the world media covers us, the international organizations we participate in, the countries we associate with. We remember things like the axis of evil, all that sort of stuff we take in. Cultural expression, whether we're inclusive or exclusive, sport, entertainment, and how we behave really on the world stage, and what we give and what we take back. And I want to quote from a friend of mine who's written more books than I could ever read about this sort of thing. But he says, in the globalized world in which we now live, every place has to compete. Every other place for a share of mind, share of income, share of talent, share of voice. And unless we can come to stand for something, we stand little chance of being remembered for long enough to compete for any of this precious attention. And this is the killer statement, because most of us spend no more than a few seconds each year thinking about a country on the other side of the world. And normally, at this point, I would ask everyone in the audience, how often do you think about Scotland? And you get
every day.
There you go, or probably every hour. But you know, when you get down to maybe once a year, it gets quite depressing as a Scot. But it really hammers it home that, you know, the world is a big place. We can't afford to think about too many countries. So, as Simon Anholt says, unless we seem always exactly like ourselves every time we crop up, there's little chance those few seconds will ever add up to a preference for our products, a desire to visit, an interest in our culture, or if we were prejudiced beforehand, a change of heart about that place. So this is the killer statement to me. So that sort of underlines the brand. Just quickly about delivering the promise. I see a lot of people trying to brand their way out of trouble. You can't do that. I was doing some work in the Balkans in Eastern Europe a few years ago, developing a brand for a country. I won't say which one, but it wanted to go with unspoilt nature as one of its core brand values. And this is, we were driving around the country, and there's this, I think you'd agree, this is quite an attractive scene, this rural gorge. But if I show you the full photograph, you may understand why it wasn't living up to it. And I said, well, look, this is what I didn't do this. I could just go on Facebook and say, guess where I was? Look, they call themselves Unspoilt Nature. So the point is, there's no hiding place for the 24/7 social media. And social media is so important because 61% of us share photos or holiday experiences online. 37% of millennials are influenced by social media to go to a place. And 34% have actually booked a holiday. It's what they see on social media. But only 33% of us, a third, believe what a brand says about itself. But most of us believe what our peers say about a brand, and that's where social media kicks in. I love this phrase. If you talk to people the way advertising talk to people, they'd punch you in the face. So again, sticking with social media, in the old days before social media, the traditional message, generally advertisers would say you had to see it 3 times before you noticed it. With a digi message, you have to see it 7 times. And Jeff Bezos has made this observation, well, it's so true. He says, if you make customers unhappy in the physical world, they might tell each 6 friends. If you make them unhappy on the internet, they can each tell 6,000 friends, which is why that's so important. So now a quick run through the branding of Scotland. It's a bit of a, as asked by Chris to take you to. So just to let you see where Scotland is, we're kind of this wee country stuck on a small island at the northern tip of Europe, practically. How are we perceived? We did a lot of research when I ran the Scottish Tourist Board into our attitudes to Scotland worldwide. They thought we had a lot of integrity, which is important for business. Tenacity, we stuck with things and saw them through. Innovation was important because you may not know, but we invented the telephone, the television, the fridge, the bicycle, penicillin, the MRI scanner, lots of things that we
radar, beta blockers, the list ends, yeah.
I've got to say, Ron, we just haven't got time to go into all of them, but a lot of things. The fridge amazed me. I didn't realize that. And a strong spirit. So that was all very positive for business. But what about
blue paint? Blue paint.
Sorry?
We invented blue paint.
Yeah. And football hooliganism. So tourism values, though, I think you're warm to these, are dramatic history, stunning scenery, intriguing culture, and friendly people. These are pretty universal. We then said, but is it the same everywhere? Every country? So we then did research in different countries to see what were the things that mattered most or that people liked most about it. So you guys said we were warm and hospitable, which is very nice, thank you. That Scotland reeked of a history and a heritage way, way older than North America has, and that was very, very appealing. And we had a lot of traditions, but also there was a sense that the contemporary was really important too. It wasn't a glass case culture, which used to be more the case, but traditional was certainly more important than contemporary. Italians saw Scotland very differently. They said, well, from Scotland come these chic, stylish upmarket products like cashmere and tartan. They buy a lot of their cashmere for the Italian fashion industry from Scotland. Malt whiskey, but good quality, expensive malt whiskey. Smoked salmon, perceived to be a very upmarket product. So Scotland for them was very much a luxury experience. The French, they were kind of completely off-piste. They said, it's romantic and historically evocative. They love them. I'm sure none of you would like this, but they love this ghoulish, misty, historical feeling. They said it was phantasmagorical. It associated Scotland with ghosts, which, for a lot of people that'd be scary, but they loved that. And the wild, untamed character of Scotland. They loved the idea of hunting. A lot of people, would not like that, but the French loved that sort of bloodthirsty stuff. So very different from the way you guys see it, from the way the Italians see it. Germans, they were really into our warrior culture. They saw Scotland as a place full of warriors like Ron. Solid, rugged, bloody clan history. They loved the bloodthirsty history of our clans. Again, very different from the others. In Japan, different again. They loved the Loch Ness Monster, which they didn't see as threatening, but cute. A guy that most Scots had never heard of.
Yes, Thomas Glover, yeah.
Yeah, he was the founder of Mitsubishi.
That's right.
Huge man in Japan, went over there long time ago, obviously. Most Scots have never heard of him. He's in every Japanese school syllabus. So he's, to them, the epitome of Scotland. And of course, luxury stuff, luxury whiskey. So those are the icons and the comments that are coming up by a lot of people. The English, they saw us even differently again. A lot of them thought we didn't have proper roads, but very scenic and rural. but we're a bit feisty. We're quite complex, and politically, things might be changing. You know, there's a lot of talk about we may be independent. So there's a very love-hate relationship going on there. Very different from the rest. We saw ourselves in a way that nobody else did, as most nations always do. We thought we were and we are a very modern technological nation because we assemble most of the computers that are sold in Europe, big tech industry. We had this line, we're the best small country in the world. I'm sure you wouldn't disagree with that, Ron.
No, I don't.
A lot of conflict over whether we're a traditional or innovative. So rural versus urban. I think internationally we're seen as rural. Back home, a lot of us see ourselves as more urban. And then this great Scottish phrase, "Why's like us?" Who's like us? We're great. And Sean Connery as James Bond was the sort of the epitome of that. So that's a kind of rough run through of how different nations see us. The conclusion is very simple. We have a core brand values I showed you at the beginning, which is always Scotland, but we have to tweak them and nuance them by market to attract different people in when we present them. So I'm near the end, Chris. Clearly the future. So brand image, I think, is going to be all about trusting a place and reliability when we come to travel. I think countries that already have a strong brand image will have a head start, obviously. I think we're seeing that countries that have handled the pandemic well will restart with a lot more trust in the bank, and they might kick off quicker in terms of tourism recovery. Openness, transparency, and honesty will, for the reasons I've said, be even more brand critical because of these health and hygiene concerns. If people believe you when you say, we haven't got a massive amount of disease, or we've got over it, or it's safe, or whatever, then that's going to be more important than ever. And word of mouth always used to be the best form of advertising, but word of digit, from what you saw about what Jeff Bezos said, is word of mouth squared or quadrupled. Very important. And the other thing I want to say is high tech, and I think we'll see an acceleration of technology for the reasons I've said, so that we can have low touch, safe, transactional lives, but it won't dispense with humanity. I think you'll see automatic check-in in a hotel. You've got electronic boarding cards already. That, I hope, will free up people to do the customer service bit. So that's my hope, that while we go down the route of much more tech, much less interaction at those difficult or those boring bits like check-in, check-out, boarding or whatever, that actually we'll still have human beings to talk to and to provide a better level of customer service. So that's my hope. I think there'll be something happening there. Finally, honestly, this is the last line. Let's look at an indicative timeline. For the rest of this year, I'm characterizing it as lockdown release. We're releasing from lockdown, and people are monetizing virtual experiences rather than real travel. We've got new revenue streams, like Ron was saying, about Singapore Airlines parking on the ground and doing, getting money for people coming eating it. I don't know if any of you know about Untapped New York, who are a walking tour operator. They're actually selling virtual tours online. A lot of people are doing it free, but they're actually monetizing it. So you can actually pay to have a virtual tour. So a lot of new revenue streams. Getting ready for visitors, staycation is important. And we'll see a limited international, but mostly short haul and domestic travel, I think, till the end of this year. 2021, I think, we're going to see a better application of what I call test, trace, and isolate. So we more testing of people. I think we'll start to see visitor confidence returning a bit. We'll still have the social distancing going on. We might see theaters reopening, and we'll see short haul international travel picking up a bit more towards the summer and end of 2021. The long term, which is hopefully when we have a vaccination, we'll start to see long haul travel picking up. I think we might see conferences coming back. I hope we'll see festivals and events and sporting events where you can have full stadia. But who knows? That's just a kind of a rough idea. But we already look like we're having in a lot of Europe, I don't know about the States, but in a lot of Europe, we already look like we're going to a second wave, which is meaning more lockdown. We're going to see local spikes, which will, as I said at the beginning, involve temporary restrictions from time to time. And this is the thing that IATA have said, passenger demand in Europe is expected to recover gradually. and will not reach last year's levels until 2024. Many would say last year's levels are unsustainable anyway, but nevertheless, it gives you an idea of what sort of timeline we might be looking at. And finally, I think we have to think like this. During hard times, a structural break in the economy has to be an opportunity in disguise. We've got to take it. We've got to see that. But I hope that today's secret, rural, hidden, remote places will not become tomorrow's over-tourism hotspots. And that's where we need to have very good destination management to ensure that all those people that would have gone to cities are crowding into even smaller beauty spots and trashing them. My hope is that won't happen. But anyway, if you have been, thank you for listening. If we have time, I'm happy to discuss and have further questions.
Well, Tom, we thank you very much. Here's some big silent applause for you, my friend.
Thank you.
You deserve a drink and some good rest.
Right,
Okay.
Tom, I'll leave you with one opinion about Aberdeen, where I was there. You know, there were two things that stood out for me. Number one was black pudding, which was a real good experience. And then we got to meet the Lord Provost, which I thought was a fantastic tourism idea, because he was in full regalia and gave us a history of the city, and he was just a very charismatic person. So I had never seen it in any other city. So those were the two things that I had, that's what I remember about Scotland.
That's lovely to hear, Radesh. And can I suggest, if you want a decent black pudding, you have to buy it from the Western Isles of Scotland. It's nectar from there.
Oh, I would say that, you know, all my Scottish friends are watching my face. Well, they didn't tell me what it was.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's
Tom,
lovely.
Tom,
lovely
maybe maybe you should rebrand it Mac Nectar. Listen, these acronyms, FOGOs and BLOGOs and blisters and so on, have you copyrighted these?
No, I have to say, Fogos has been around for a while. No,
Oh, it has.
been around for a while. Fogos actually came from a discussion I had with a client recently, and Blistos is my own, which is really a bit cumbersome. No,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy for people to use.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to know you think of me as a Blisto, and probably Chris as well.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm guilty by association.
Yes, you are.
Ron, you've got to remember, Blisto has a touch of aspiration about it.
Well, Tom, I look forward to seeing you next summer, my friend.
I hope so.
Thank you very much, Tom, for doing this, really. And, you know, if you don't mind, I'm